Well, Arsenal couldn't really do it 3 times in a row, could they? Drop points where they really shouldn't have, or drop games because some of those were cup games. But they didn't. They got the job done 2-1 at home against Tottenham Hotspur. And I have to say it was a fairly dominant performance from Mikel Arteta's side. Really kept it tight, really kept it together. Was aggressive off the ball, and I thought we're technically top drawer on the ball. Just that age-old issue for Arsenal that prevented the scoreline, reflecting that these two were probably a lot more than 2-1 apart in terms of quality. Missed chances, Havertz, Sterling, Trossard, Rice, even Odegaard, just they lack ruthlessness, and it's not just a striker. I think it's just a team issue because even with a striker, you still have to have a good supply of goals elsewhere. I know obviously Saka's injured, and that is a source of goals, but you look at City without Haaland when he's not scoring. There really just seems to be a lack of ruthlessness coming from all over the side, which is why I just think Liverpool are the much better team in English football at the minute, because I think they've got 4 or 5 goal threats. They've maybe got some purple patch goal threats where the likes of Nunes can hit a run and he can look good for a bit. Diaz can do the same. Gakpo can do the same. But the thing you can rely on with that is they all just seem to hit those patches when the other is not. So that's a little bit of luck, obviously. Whereas Arsenal, I just don't think they even have players capable of purple patches. I just think they have steady, good, decent players where their main quality isn't goal scoring, which is kind of important to win football games. That's probably the most in-depth bit of tactical analysis I'll ever provide you with on this channel. But we'll go over the Arsenal attacking phase first, and this will take up the majority of the video, I'm pretty sure. So Arsenal would, as you can see, build up in a sort of regular 4-3-3. As per, no real need to go over the positions. They're all fairly straightforward. It would change, and I'll describe how as we move this on. Spurs going full press, man-to-man, near enough all over the pitch. Son would move on to Saliba from Timber, leaving him free with Solanke typically coming on from Gabriel. Typically, Solanke occupies space in between the two centre-backs for the opposition, but because of how split Arsenal are, it's very hard for him to shadow that pass. And when David Raya plays the role in the build-up that he does, he's almost 1-on-3 in those points. He's so comfortable on the ball, Raya. He plays out really well. And so Solanke could shadow the pass into Gabriel to while pressing David Raya, but he couldn't cover that and Saliba as well. So Son would quickly have to come up. This would force Jed Spence up onto Timber. Basuma pushing onto Odegaard, Bergval onto Partey, and Sarr would look after Rice, and he did a really, really poor job on it. And we'll discuss that a little bit more in a second. He did a really poor job off the ball in general. So Solanke could come inside as well to Raya. This would also bring Kulusevski up a little bit more onto Gabriel, and they try and pin Arsenal into that half. And it didn't work for a couple of reasons. One, because of the rotations in possession. 2, Spurs not doing their pressing and marking jobs in that original build-up phase. 3, Arsenal went long quite a lot. Very direct, very high, getting the ball up as quickly as possible. They know Spurs are a really good pressing side, so they're looking to beat that. They're looking to bypass that and get the ball up the field as much as they possibly could. They definitely went direct more than they went short. Havertz as the target man to hold the ball up. Obviously Sterling with his pace and behind Trossard's just a very clever player in terms of his positioning. And with Odegaard and Rice quickly getting forward, they have second ball opportunities. So we'll discuss when they got up the pitch further on after I've just discussed this little build-up phase. But the build-up phase was a secondary quality to the way Arsenal played this game. Direct was the first option. But when they were in build-up stages, it would look like this, as I was just saying. And the rotations came when this happened. Odegaard playing a little bit higher up in the half space, so Basuma was a little bit deeper alongside Sarr. So Partey would come in here looking to show it for the ball as the sole pivot. Lewis Skelly would look to invert from his left-back position, making it a double pivot, which pushed Rice far out wide, which I don't mind. I've been very critical of Rice in these build-up stages for Arsenal previously. I actually felt like his positioning was good because it caused issues for Spurs when it maybe shouldn't have, but it did. And so this created a bit of a +1 for Arsenal in the build-up stages that Spurs struggled to deal with. Bergval was almost left a little bit 2-on-1 in these areas up against Lewis Skelly, up against Partey. He was kind of having to manage 2. And space could be created, whether that's Kulusevski coming inside to this area, a pass could be switched around to the far side with Gabriel and Rice both over there in space. Another one would be if Bergval went over to Lewis Skelly, Basuma could jump up from Odegaard, and then this left Odegaard in a lot of space if he could receive the ball, as Arsenal do have players that are decent in terms of holding on to the ball and not rushing even while being pressed. If Timber could find that little reverse pass into Odegaard, who then had time to turn and attack, Basuma would have to react and drop in, so would Bergvall, so would Pape Matar Sarr have to react to come over to him. And that would be where the danger was. But it ultimately comes from Sarr being in this no man's land position. Instead of ditching Rice to come over into this area and allow Kulusevski to move back in, he didn't. If he'd have just pressed up into this area here to block that pass into Lewis Skelly, it would have been fine. Basuma could have stayed on Odegaard and Spurs could have had their man-to-man press it well intact. But he didn't. He stayed deep in between Rice and in between Lewis Skelly. So it meant that Lewis Skelly could get on the ball, turn and play forward, or they could just drag players further up the pitch, create space elsewhere. And Odegaard getting the ball in these half spaces, whether it's from the direct option to Havertz or that little space in the build-up in behind Spence, then meant he could look to try and play Sterling in on this right-hand side. And Sterling, to be fair, with his pace and his movement, was a threat. Getting down this right-hand side, where Sterling did let himself down, was his quality on the ball. For a change, just Arteta just thinking he can make diamond out of coal. And to be fair, Sterling's a little bit better than Cole, but right now he's probably nearer to coal than he is a diamond. So he could get in down this line pretty frequently and create nothing, look for the easy pass, look for it to go backwards, rely on Odegaard and Timber joining him in the attack. And to be fair, I thought Archie Gray managed these situations really well. He's obviously not a centre back, but he's growing into that role and doing his absolute best to keep what is a fragile defence for Spurs as tight as he possibly can. However bad Spurs have been, you cannot blame Archie Gray. He is playing a role he's clearly uncomfortable with to the best of his absolute ability. So you could get Arsenal up the field in this area through Sterling. The occasional time as well where Havertz found himself out on the right wing. I will never understand why he does it. Personally, Sterling could get on the ball in the centre and maybe attack that back line with his dribbling and look for the run of Trossard. Happened a couple times that didn't result in anything, but Havertz has not got the quality to play out wide, so I don't know why he finds himself in this position. Maybe it's a psychological thing. If I stay away from the box, nobody can have a go at me when I inevitably miss a 3-yard sitter. But it happens, and regardless, still with that threat of Odegaard being on the ball, Arsenal could get up the pitch, and this is what the shape looked like. Spurs in these areas dropped really deep, so deep that you'd see Partey almost midway through the opposition half, Saliba and Lewis Skelly and Gabriel coming very high into the Spurs half because they had the space to do it and squeeze them as deep as they could. Spurs allowed so much pressure when they went onto the defensive stage, and it didn't help them. And their main threat, Arsenal, was this triangle on the right-hand side of Odegaard, Sterling and Timber. Timber's runs and his technical quality to receive the ball, draw a man over to him and quickly lay it off to the man in space was excellent. Him and Sterling could interchange, one finding himself out wide, the other finding himself inside. Sterling could make an underlapping run to find the ball down the line from any of these. Also, you could get the best out of Odegaard's technical quality in these areas to slip passes through to their movement. But ultimately, their role would be to draw maybe Son in a little bit deeper alongside the fullback, Bergvall to come in and try and overload that area to win the ball back and lay it off to Odegaard if he couldn't create down that right-hand side with these two. And Sterling, as I said, did get a few openings to get crosses away or shots away. Quality let him down. And getting Odegaard into this position where he could turn onto his left foot would then invite the movements of Havertz, Rice and Trossard to attack the box from this far post area, and he could swing a ball over and connect with that wide overload on the far side with three powerful players, aerial threats, and Trossard a fantastic poacher at the back post and great movement. And it was pulled off a few times again, finishing let Arsenal down. The story's been written, it's been read, and it's been put to bed. Ooh, bars. There we go. Didn't think you'd be seeing that on this episode. It's not a TV show. There's a lot going on here. But also because of how deep and compact Spurs were, and as I was mentioning, how high Arsenal were pushing up the pitch, if they couldn't connect down this side, they had easy players to be able to pass the ball to and spray it over to the far side. So Partey could get on the ball, look to switch the play quickly. Saliba could as well, because with these players running inside, it would force that Spurs shape narrow. So if someone remained out wide, maybe Trossard, Saliba getting on the ball could turn and play the ball over, and then they could look to attack on this far side. Lewis Skelly would look to underlap or overlap in support of Rice and Trossard, one of them remaining deep, the other attacking the half space, the other wide, as it was on the far side. And as well, with Lewis Skelly then moving from the defensive line to attack that area, you'd get Timber dropping in just to make sure Arsenal's rest defence was as solid as it could be and give that added layer of protection and that added layer of versatility and quality to this Arsenal team performance. And through that, they got their goals. Brilliant display. But how did Spurs approach the game from an attacking point of view, and how did Arsenal deal with that? We'll go over that now. So Spurs, typical 2-3-2-3 fullbacks invert. Pedro Porro would find himself a lot further up than I've switched Archie Gray and Jed Spence around for no real reason, but Pedro Porro would be high up in the half space. Jed Spence would be a lot deeper, with Sarr filling in at Pedro Porro's fullback position alongside Basuma. And it would be pretty compact, pretty tight, and they'd look to try and either build up through the thirds or use the direct option, but they'd be very quickly closed down in whatever action they decided to make, with Havertz moving from Dragazin to Kinski, and that was really where the problem started for Kinski. Took a few too many chances. Not that he took a few too many chances with his passing and his distribution, it's that he was a little bit too calm about it, and I think he was looking for triggers, he was looking for players to become free, because with Archie Gray being the full man and with Havertz pressing on from Dragazin over to him, he was waiting for that pressure from Sterling onto Gray or Odegaard from Basuma onto Gray. They both shadowed their men while moving into the free player, and so we could maybe chip that ball over the top into the man that would become free, which we've seen he has the quality to do in the Liverpool game. He was exceptional at it. The problem is Arsenal off the ball are phenomenal, and they react really well to the free man. They press so quickly and so aggressively that you just don't really get that time to play that pass. And Havertz did a really good job of pressing him and forcing him into issues, almost winning a few opportunities to get clear sights at goal. And for Kinski, this will be a massive learning experience. Really struggled. But again, not going to be too critical of him, but he did struggle, and I think the occasion may have gotten to him a bit. You've got to play these North London derbies differently. You can't play as you would in just the run-of-the-mill league game. But him looking for this pass out wide would look to go to Gray. Sterling, as I said, or Odegaard would look to come in and press him. Partey would then move on to Basuma, be ready to press him if that player became free in the centre. So that would obviously leave Bergvall free, and Bergvall could drop in a little bit deeper to look for the easy pass and try and get his team out of trouble. The one player that was crucial to this working and working well was Yuri and Timber. Saliba would come across to Son. Gabriel would stick on Solanke. Lewis Skelly watching Kulusevski on the far side. But with those guys dropping, Timber had to be alert and react to the free man. Now, because of it being built up on that one side and Bergvall coming over to that side, it meant that he didn't have a lot of space in between those two decisions when he made them. But he still had to be alert and he still had to be ready to be aggressive and kill the danger before it had a chance to develop and cause issues, and he was excellent at it, closing down Spence if Sterling was the one that went to Gray, or closing down Bergvall if the Odegaard press happened and the ricochet happened where Partey moved up to Basuma, because obviously Basuma is very good with his press resistance and his technical quality in being able to play forward, and Timber was excellent. I thought off the ball, fantastic. Everyone in Arsenal were. They pressed brilliantly, but he did an excellent job. Rice and Trossard sticking to Porro and Sarr on the far side. It could be a manner of shapes. They would just stick to their man, wouldn't pass over. So even if Porro came in a little bit wider to receive the ball, Trossard would follow him there, follow him into the half space, either or. And the one thing that Spurs did make it easier for with Arsenal is because they are so narrow in their build-up, and I feel like I've spoken about Spurs' narrow build-up as a criticism 1,000 times on this channel, and you know what? I'll speak about it 1,000 times more because that's just how petty I am. But when you are so narrow, when you're playing against a team that are pressing you high man-to-man aggressively, and they've got to react to the spare man, there's not a lot of space for them to have to travel. They can quickly close down while staying close enough to their original marker to prevent that play out. And the only time they could really come out of these situations was with Bergvall dropping in to get on the ball, turning on it and using his fantastically powerful strides from deep to drive the ball forward. Arsenal would react well. They'd drop in. They'd look to get their pressers close to him quickly. Rice especially was brilliant in covering round and winning the ball back. Rice in those defensive transitions as one of the best players in the world. But that was a threat, and he is a fantastic talent, Bergvall, one I can't wait to see develop. And it's Yaya Toure like the way you can drive with the ball from deep in full flow. So that was an option. Also, the direct option, going from back to front pretty quickly with the likes of Solanke, who can hold the ball up and work centre backs. And if he tried to drop in to get on the ball in these deeper situations to provide another option, Gabriel would track him and get close to him and prevent him from playing. But again, Arsenal defended excellently. Gabriel managed Solanke brilliantly. He had an excellent game. Stuck close to him, defended him, and prevented him from dropping deep and linking up, which Solanke does have that quality to do. And even if the direct option went to the left-hand side to Son, He did try and get on the ball and use his back to goal play to link up. Saliba kept him from turning and getting any real sight on goal in behind, and forced him backwards, forced him into easy passes that allowed Arsenal to get back into shape and drop in a little bit more. And with that front three, with Kulusevski outright, who they couldn't really reach, the only time they maybe could is if Bergval had a bit of freedom to play in. But with Kulusevski playing wide right, as well as the other two I just spoke about, there's no transitional threat. There's no player that's really willing to run in behind. I don't think that Brennan Johnson is a fantastic player, but I think he's needed for that front three. Do they need better than him in terms of quality? Absolutely. But do they need that player, even if he's at a bit more of a primitive form for where you'd like to be? I think it's essential. Kulusevski, I don't think, is the same player out wide as he is in the centre. He doesn't show the full repertoire of his technical and playmaking and creative qualities when he's stuck out wide. Maybe against a team that is sitting in a low block and looking to soak up pressure, and he can find those little pockets of space if Porro decides to overlap. But Arsenal aren't going to do that. They're going to press high and prevent Spurs from playing out, which they did countless times. And so Spurs didn't really have a transitional threat. Made changes in the second half when they brought on Brennan Johnson and Maddison. It did improve quite a bit. The quality of their play did cause Arsenal a couple more issues, but still not enough, because as much as they could get forward and Brennan Johnson and Maddison could add to the quality, there was still just not enough, and Arsenal's defensive quality was far too high. And now it is fair to say that they did make changes start second half. Ange Postecoglou, he brought on Brennan Johnson and Maddison, and it did improve. They did get forward a lot more. They did beat the press with a bit more technical quality, players finding positions that were a bit more unconventional, and asked some questions of Arsenal in the press, and did get forward, but Arsenal defended excellently. And even the odd time it did break out to Brennan Johnson or Kulusevski on this right-hand side, Lewis Skelly, which, by the way, I've left a note in my notes, which you can't see, so I'm going to read it out to you. Settle down, kids. Bedtime story awaits. How good is Lewis Skelly? He's unbelievable. 18, he's barely played first-team football until the last couple of months. Composed on the ball, his passing is cute, it's clever, it's weighted perfectly. Physically, he defends his players one-on-one brilliantly, uses his body excellently, reads the ball as well going in behind him to track that run and prevent him from getting a clear sight. This lad is going to be England left-back by the time the World Cup comes around. I have absolutely no doubts about it. Assuming his development carries on the way it is, what a player he is, by the way. He is excellent. And the odd time the ball did get into crossing opportunities for Spurs, so let's just say, if I drop this in a little bit, Kulusevski or whoever, Solanke did offer some really good bits of movement to get in front of Gabriel or Saliba, mostly Gabriel, because that was the man he was left with, and get near post to get his foot on a cross and put it in the back of the net. Gabriel's defending of him in the box was unbelievable, deserving of the man of the match that he was given, and Solanke couldn't get a sniff. And Solanke did everything right in terms of his movement, getting across his man, a great burst of pace to get into good positions. Gabriel was on top of everything, read everything spot on, and it must have been so frustrating for Solanke because he couldn't have done much more, to be fair. But all that resulted in Arsenal having a fantastic game, winning the ball back in these situations, getting up the field, with Porro and Jed Spence's positioning, and Sterling and Trossard staying so close, and especially Sterling, if they won the ball back in these areas, in that central area, then Sterling would make quick runs off of Spence, Trossard would make quick runs off of Porro, which resulted in the second goal, and they were alert to it every time Arsenal won the ball. They gave them an outball to break that central cluster once they'd received the ball back in those situations. They exploited the space that Spurs allowed themselves to create and got their awards for it. Fantastic performance. It's one Arteta needed, big style. Could have been more in another day, and it's just something they can use to push on and put the last few weeks behind them. Still crucial months to come in the season, so it's best not to let their heads drop this quickly. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below, tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.